Here are all the books I read in July. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now for today's video, I'm doing my July wrap-up. Like all my wrap-ups I've done in the past, I'm not going to be talking about all the books I have read this month, simply because I read a lot. In the month of July so far, today is July 31st, the last day of July, and I am going to finish some more books, but I figured I'm just going to sit down and film this video now. I've read already 70 books, or at least 70 items. Now, I don't really remember me reading a lot of novellas, so I think majority of the times it was through audiobooks and through ebooks, and also through some physical books as well. So if you have not been following me on Goodreads yet, I highly recommend you to go check me out. Add me as a friend, follow me on Goodreads for reviews. I keep everything up to date there. As soon as I finish a book, I add it to my shelf, and then I put a review and a rating. So go check it out if you haven't already. I asked for a lot of feedback in regards to wrap-up videos, and a lot of viewers actually gave me back some comments that I thought were pretty interesting. One of the commenters actually gave me some really helpful feedback, and she basically said that she doesn't like wrap-ups because wrap-ups tend to have a lot of redundancies. And she said that booktubers tend to talk about the same book through reading vlogs, through book recommendations, and then through wrap-ups. So it's like 3 times that they hear the books. So I figured that for this wrap-up too as well, since I talked so much about the books that I did read this month through those videos such as book recommendation videos and reading vlogs and also review videos, I figured that I would just give a very quick rundown of all the books that I have read and have already mentioned in previous videos ahead of the other books that I want to discuss. But let's get started on the books that are good, the bad, and the books that are worth your time to hear more about. So in my most recent reading vlog, I actually read 5 books, and here are the quick rundowns of the books that I did pick. So the first book that I did read was A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Maney, and this one was unfortunately not the one for me, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Full thoughts are in that reading vlog. It was a YA contemporary romance involving some grief handling, friendship building, and then also a lot of baking as well. Then I read The Layover by Lacey Wilding, and this one I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this romantic comedy involving a flight attendant who has a long-term boyfriend, and she decides that she's going to quit her job as a flight attendant after her one last flight. And there she works with one of her colleagues that she really hates, and this one follows an enemies to lovers trope. In the same reading vlog, I also read a thriller novel called The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, and then this one I gave it around a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This one is about a female heroine who is a little bit evil because she grew up in a bad background and she walks dogs for really rich families, and there she has her eyes set on a really wealthy man. This one is also a retelling of Jane Eyre, and it was dark and atmospheric. Full thoughts are also in that vlog as well. And then more classic retellings, I picked up Innocence and Sensibility. This is book number 3 in the Raja series by Sonali Dev, and I quite enjoyed this one, but this one had a lot of trigger warnings for assault, racism, gun violence, and basically depression, anxiety, and rape as well. And this one I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I really liked it, but it was a lot of angst, and a lot of things actually happened towards the end that I felt like it could have been happened earlier in the book so that we wouldn't feel really rushed towards the end. So I still would recommend you to pick this one up though. And then we have The Consequence of Falling by Claire Contreras. I love Claire's books. This one I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. This one is an office enemies to lovers romance, which is my catnip. I love it so much. It's about our female heroine who's trying to take back the family business after her childhood enemies decides that he wants to own the business for himself. And then in one of my most anticipated reads videos, I actually read a Lauren Lane novel, and this one's called To Sir with Love. This one is about our female heroine who likes to write messages on this dating app, but she doesn't know the identity of the person she's writing to, so it's kind of like a pen pal, and there she falls in love with 2 guys. One man on the internet and then the other man in real life who is also her enemy, who wants to take over her family champagne business. It's a very fun, light read, but it just wasn't for me, and this one I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And if you're looking for a kind of like childhood friends to lovers romance, then you should pick up People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I like this a little bit less than Beach Reads, which is kind of her debut adult romance novel. This one involved our 2 characters who love to go on vacation every single single year until one moment they have a best friend breakup and they never speak to each other again for like at least a year until they build up the courage to speak to each other again and go on one last vacation together. Obviously, feelings are there and they have to go through a lot in order to be together. And then I picked up a thriller novel called The Night Swim by Megan Golding. This one had a past and present story. It told from 2 different timelines and from multiple characters' points of views. It has trigger warnings of rape, sexual assault, crime cases, death, and it's just depression, anxiety, and everything under the sun. So be aware when you step into this book. This one I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I felt like it was more of a crime fiction novel than a thriller novel. And then I got a copy of The Heart Principle by Helen Hong, and this book is coming out later on this year. This one involves a female heroine who is a violinist, and she puts a lot of pressure on herself, and she discovers that maybe she might be actually on the spectrum. Her long-term boyfriend decides that they want to have an open relationship, so she hops on a dating app, and that's where she meets our hero, who is Kwan, that we've met in the first 2 books that Helen Hong has actually written and published. And this is their romance where it's kind of like a one-night stand turned into something more. It involves a lot of other trigger warnings like depression, anxiety, taking care of a loved one. It involves a lot of health issues as well. So this one was a little bit darker than I expected, and it featured a lot more women's fiction elements to it. So this one I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars simply because the romance felt a little bit in the way of the main story. Then I picked up Isn't It Romantic by Lyssa Kay Adams, and now this one is book number 4 in the Romance Book Club series. It involves a bunch of dudes who get together to read romance novels to try to figure out the woman's psyche and like their minds and things like that. Isn't It Romantic follows our main Russian hero that we've met in books 1, 2, and 3. He was usually the butt of the joke, pun intended, where he makes a lot of fart noises and he farts a lot, and he's deemed as like a little bit gross. This is a story that involves fake dating, fake marriage, marriage of convenience. It involves our hero trying to make his fake marriage into something actually real, and it also includes childhood friends to lovers elements too as well. And our hero is actually a secret romance writer. This one I really enjoyed and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams, and this one is a summer beachy read involving a female heroine who has been jilted at the altar, so she now has to go on the honeymoon by herself, or so she thinks. She decides to go with an acquaintance that she met through high school, and this is a romance story, but it's almost like more of a woman's fiction novel about our female heroine trying to learn what makes her happy and what doesn't make her happy. This one unfortunately fell off a little bit of my expectations, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read like a historical romance fiction novel slash paranormal romance called Breath of Magic by Teresa Medeiros. This one involves our female heroine who is a witch, and she's being trialed as a witch, and she might actually die, but then miraculously she time travels into the future, into the year 1996, and that's where she meets our hero, who is a cynic and who does not believe in love. I really like this fall witchy read, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This one involves our female heroine who is based off of a character on this Canadian television show called Schitt's Creek. She has to go back to the small town and she has to learn how to make a proper decent living for herself after she basically ruined her whole career as a celebrity and an influencer back home. And there she meets our grumpy hero, who is also a fisherman, and this is kind of an enemies to lovers romance, but it's more friends to lovers romance. This one kind of was a big disappointment for me, and I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars, but I'm sure I'm going to reread very soon in the future because everybody has been raving about it and I just want to give it a second try. So now moving on to the books that I haven't been speaking about in my recommendation videos or in my other like fun little videos that I posted throughout the month. These are new reads that you've never heard me talk about before, but this month of July I actually read a lot of series. I was having kind of an OCD moment where I had to read book number 1, and after I read book number 1 I needed to read the rest of the books in the series just so I could check it off my list that I finished them. But I found a new author that I actually really enjoy and that I want to read more of in the upcoming months of 2021, and her name is Erica Wilde. Now, I read her series called Tall, Dark, and Sexy series. It's just 3 books. The books are fairly short, like they're like maybe 250 pages. I really enjoyed them because they were very fun and flirty. So if you're looking for a light rom-com read to cap off your summer, this is the series for you. So it starts off with book number 1 called Tall, Dark, and Charming, and this one involves kind of an enemies to lovers romance. Our heroine and our hero are thrown together, and our heroine is not susceptible to his charms. Like, she just doesn't care about him at all because he's a big flirt, he's a womanizer. But then they have one explosive night together and they can't resist each other, and they know that there is a spark between each other and there's something more to be discovered, until she realizes that she is actually pregnant. So now this one is following a surprise pregnancy trope. So if this one's not for you, then I totally understand. This one for me, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I felt that it was kind of average, it was kind of meh, and I just didn't really mesh well with the pregnancy trope as well and how it was played out. But I'm glad I continued with the rest of the series. Book number 2 is called Tall, Dark, and Irresistible, and now this one follows our hero who has been heartbroken because he thought that he has found the one and that he's going to marry her and live happily ever after, until she doesn't show up, and now he's crushed and heartbroken and he does not believe in love anymore, or at least he doesn't want to fall in love anymore because he doesn't want to hurt himself. And then what happens is that our female heroine actually sees him at a bar, takes a photo of him, and then shows it to her family and her friends, and basically says that this random guy is actually my boyfriend, and you guys shouldn't be worried about me being alone in the city and being single, because I'm not, and I have this man to take care of me. But what actually happens is that now her family wants to meet him, and she has to convince this stranger to be her fake boyfriend. So this one follows a fake dating trope. I thought this one was really fun. It was very flirty. It was a romance novel that I really wanted. And I felt like our male hero's emotions were conveyed really well, in the sense that he was hurt and he was very unsure of this new blossoming relationship. So this one, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last book in the series is called Tall, Dark, and Tempting. And now this one follows 2 childhood best friends, and they're still best friends. And they secretly have a crush on each other, but they don't tell each other because they think the other person doesn't like them back and reciprocate the feelings. So now our 2 characters are kind of stuck in this weird limbo where they're kind of going round and round each other. Our hero is deemed to be kind of like a womanizer and who is always like crushing on girls, breaking women's hearts and things like that. And our female heroine sees it all and doesn't appreciate it and doesn't like it because she knows that she can't be vulnerable to him with her emotions and wear her heart on her sleeve. So she decides that she still wants a happily ever after, and the only way that she can get it is through the help of her best friend. So she actually asks her best friend to be her wingman. And now this is the story of matchmaking gone wrong because they both like each other. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars because it just was so fun, and hopefully it did sound fun to you as I was talking to you about this book. I would definitely recommend you to check this one out. Moving on to another series and a new author. This one I picked up is called The Flower Shop Sisters by Iris Moreland. And now this one had really different covers. Right now, if you go on Kindle Unlimited, you'll see that the covers are illustrated. And no offense, I don't like the cover change. I think the covers were a lot nicer when there were real life models. And then especially it got really annoying because by the 3rd book, the covers were all changed. So the 3rd book doesn't match the first 2 old covers, which annoys me because when I put it on my Goodreads, it looks ugly when it's like standing side by each other. And also for Goodreads, I would just like to let you guys know that on my Goodreads challenge, it's like a grid, right? So when I pick my next read, it has to match the book next to it. And it's like a color gradient theme thing. It's like aesthetic purposes and it's really weird. But if you want to go check it out, go check out my Goodreads channel. But let's talk about the first book in that series. So Petal Plucker is actually about one of the sisters in 3 sisters of the family, and she runs a flower shop with her 2 other sisters. Our main female heroine is a virgin, and for some reason, this whole book really focused on her virginity, which is something that I think the romance community doesn't really like. And I'm starting to not really like too as well, because why are we so obsessed with like our own virginities and the characters' virginities? But, you know, moving that aside, our main female heroine has an enemy or a nemesis, and that is her childhood crush who humiliated her when they were in their high school years. And then now he's back into the small town and he's actually her main competition because he does flower arrangements just like how she does floral arrangements. And now they're going head to head in competitions and they're bumping into each other more, but then they also realize that there's a sizzling attraction between each other. Now this one I actually really didn't like mainly because our character was a little bit vapid. She only cared about her virginity. Like, the book was so centered around it that I was so confused. And then it also was a lot steamier than the illustrative cover or even the model cover suggested. But this one, I gave it, unfortunately, a 2 out of 5 stars. And then we moved on to the second book in the series called He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not. And this one involves our female heroine, who I think is like the oldest sister of all the sisters. And she's the responsible one. She has been working really hard for her entire life, but then she gets her heart broken. She's going through like a really bad breakup, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then basically she goes to Las Vegas to kind of break the rules and to have fun. And then she wakes up and she realizes that she has a ring on her finger and she's in bed with a stranger. And now she knows that she got married to a stranger. And worst of all, the person that she married to is not bad looking, and he actually wants to stay married to her and play out this fake relationship, which sounds pretty fun. But towards the end, or in the middle of the book, I felt like the story kind of dragged on a lot. I liked it more than the first one because we got to know our characters a little bit more. They had more discussions with each other, they got to know each other, and it felt more realistic. However, it still felt like it dragged on a little bit too long. So this one, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then finally, the last book in the series is called Oopsie Daisy, and this one involves our female heroine who has this explosive night, this one night of wonder, you know, and she realizes the next day that the person that she had a one-night stand with was actually her new professor. And now things are being blurred, you know, it's a gray area between our two characters, and it gets even more gray when she realizes that she is pregnant. So there is a surprise pregnancy trope in here. It involves our hero trying to make sure that he is following the rules in university while also keeping his feelings in check because he doesn't want to fall for someone so quickly, and her being a very strong independent woman and her saying that she doesn't need him in her life. And then this is their romance where they fall in love with each other. This one, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty good, but I didn't really like our main female heroine. I thought that she was just a little bit too spunky and a little bit rude sometimes. So the next series that I picked up was another Erica Wilde series. This series is called the Sinful series. It has 4 books in it. The first book is called Total Surrender and involves a family of like, I think 2 brothers and 1 sister, and basically their lives were ruined by this other family, and basically their whole adult lives, what they try to do is get revenge on the other family through, you know, like building a corporation that's like 10 times bigger, having very strong relationships with different powerful parties, and just like doing like devious things. So our hero is like the oldest brother, and he's like the leader of the pack, and he has cornered the family's like head, which is like the father of our main female heroine, into a business deal. And the business deal is actually to get her. So now he is going to own her and he's going to marry her, and then she will be his. And what he plans to do with this is to manipulate her father's feelings into thinking that he is not treating her well and that he has stole the one prized position from him. So now this one is a lot sweeter than it sounds. I know it sounds like kind of like a dark romance, but it was very sweet and very fluffy. Our hero is deemed to be like the bad boy. He's like the wolf on Wall Street. He is meticulous. He wants to destroy everything. But when he sees her, he just crumbles and all he cares about is her. He's a huge cinnamon roll. He takes care of her. He always talks to her, and he builds trust as well because he always makes sure that she is comfortable with everything that they are doing. So it's slow burn romance, and it was fantastic, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Also, I forgot to mention that each book in this series actually follows like a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale retelling, so that one actually followed the story of Beauty and the Beast. And then if you're into a Cinderella retelling, the book number 2 is called Absolute Pleasure, and that's exactly the fairy tale that it is based on. So our hero is the brother of the brother in the first book, and then he is cold, heartless, and he is upset that his older brother fell in love with the enemy so fast and so quickly. So he thinks that he is going to take over the family and, you know, exact revenge and things like that, until he meets our main female heroine, who is at a ball, and she is not being recognized by a lot of people because at that ball, you know, it's only the important and wealthy people. And then he's quickly intrigued by her, and he realizes that she is stuck in a very sucky situation involving her father dying and then now she's stuck with an evil stepmother and two evil stepsisters who are out to get her. And this is kind of like that romance where our hero kind of steps in, you know, uplifts her, makes her have confidence in herself, and then gets her out of sticky situations with her horrible toxic family. This one I enjoyed and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Then we moved on to book number 3 called No Inhibitions. This one is based on this fairy tale Lady and the Tramp. I never watched Lady and the Tramp, but I think it's about our main female heroine who is like an heiress and who's like super rich, but then the hero is poor. So No Inhibitions follows our sister in that family trio, and she is a lingerie designer and she is very powerful. Like, she is the queen boss. She's a boss ass woman, and now she has fallen in love with our male hero who comes from a very dark history, and this is them getting to know each other. Now this one I have to give it a 2 out of 5 stars because I don't even remember it because it's not that memorable, and B, I didn't like our main female heroine because she was very like sassy, and I didn't like that as well, even though I'm sassy. And then 3, I just did not care about our hero's backstory. I thought it was super lame, according to my Goodreads review, because I don't even remember what his backstory was. And then finally, book number 4 is a fairy tale retelling of Rapunzel. This one's called Unforgotten Passion, and now this one involves our main female heroine who is a pop star. She is like a Taylor Swift. She is very popular, but she's manipulated and being controlled by her mother, who wants her to gain as much fame as possible so that she can rake in the money as much as possible too, because she is her manager. And she meets our main hero at this one fancy ball that all the 4 books are actually connected with. Like, they all involve this ball, and that's where she sees him, and they have like this really magical moment where they fall in love. And now she wants to run away from the fame and the glory so that she can fall in love with this man. And I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it, but I didn't like it, mostly because I don't like celebrity romances. I think it's kind of lame when a lot of the outside factors, such as paparazzi, society, and things like that, get in the way between our female character and our hero getting together in the end. I don't think it's relatable, so that's why I don't like it. Moving on to another series with a new to me author. This author is called Sarah L. Hudson. She is kind of a fairly small indie romance author, so I would highly recommend you to check her out because I really enjoyed this series called Space Series. It's still continuing. She has her 4th book that's coming out later on this year, so I'm super excited to read it. This one I've already talked about in my recommendations video, but I forgot to mention it earlier on in this video. But this one is called Space Junk and it's called Houston, We Have a Hottie. And this one involves our female heroine who is actually a NASA engineer. We love our female heroines who are STEM majors, or we love our characters who are not afraid to go into industries that are male dominated and dominate that industry. So our main female heroine is very, very intelligent, as you can tell, and she works at the National Space Station, and there she lets her hair loose and she goes to a bar and she meets this girl and they have like a great time together. They're going to be BFFs together. But then what happens is that she helps her go home, and then she meets the older brother who is automatically annoyed with her because he thinks that she made her little sister drink so much. So there is a little bit of misunderstanding. There's some enemies to lovers into it, but it quickly turns into a friends to lovers that is very sweet, very cute, very slow burn, and I really, really liked it. And it had a little bit of angst and also action and suspense towards the end. So this one I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read book number 2, which is called Space Cowgirl, Houston, All Systems Go. And to be honest, when I first heard about this book and read the synopsis of this book, I didn't feel like I would like this one because I just didn't really care about our main female heroine, but I ended up really liking this one. This one involved our main female heroine's best friend from the first book. So our main heroine in this book is actually an astronaut, and she was literally floating up in space on the International Space Station for book number 1, and then she has finally landed back on Earth and she's readjusting back to life on Earth, and she has a very different, vibrant personality. She's deemed as a flirt because she's really attractive looking and she likes to make like, you know, comments, and our hero is actually turned off by her because she is so flirtatious that he thinks that she's easy, and she doesn't like girls who are easy. And she is obviously angered by this and hurt by it because her reputation is not who she is, and she's upset by him, but she has kind of like a hard shell and she decides to just kind of drop it all the time. And so this one involves kind of like that misunderstanding and like the hero having to apologize to her basically trope, and then it kind of has some groveling too as well. And this is like their romance that is an opposites attract romance, and then our hero is also grumpy and he doesn't want to find love, and then our heroine is ready to find love, but she's very vulnerable and she doesn't want to get hurt. So this one I ended up giving a 4 out of 5 stars. I also have to mention that the hero in this book is also like the brother of the hero in the first book. And I don't really like our hero in this book because he did something to the brother that is just wild and unforgivable. So keep that in mind if you decide to pick up the series. And then the next book that I finished is actually book number 3 in the series, and this one's called Space Oddities Ground Control to Major Cutie. And this one involves our main female heroine who is not in the NASA space station, and she is not the smart one, but our hero is a NASA astronaut, and he came back from space after, you know, like this like really crazy thing that happened. He actually doesn't have a really great relationship with his family, and his family always wanted him to pursue things that are like unachievable basically, and that's how he became an astronaut, and he became well loved by the whole country because he was kind of like a space hero, I guess. So he shouldn't be dating someone who is lower status than him, but he can't keep his eyes off of our main female heroine, who seems a little bit fidgety, who seems like that she always is hopping from town to town to town, and she's not really staying in one location. Meanwhile, our main female heroine actually has something that she's hiding and she's really nervous and scared about, so she literally doesn't want to form any attachments or relationships, but she ends up befriending our 2 main female heroines from the first book and the second book, and therefore she sees our hero who works at the NASA space station, and that's how they end up together. So this one was a little bit angsty and it was a little bit dramatic, and I felt really bad for our hero because he comes from kind of a sad backstory, but this one I liked it a little bit less than the other 2, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I picked up an Audible called What the Hex by Alexis Daria. Now this one follows a paranormal romance and involves our female heroine who is actually a witch. She decides to break away from her family and go to New York City to become a fashion designer, and there she kind of loses her powers, but then she returns back to her family for a big extravaganza. It's a big wedding, and there she realizes that her family might be mind controlled by something evil, and now she has to save the day with her enemy from high school, which is our hero, who is not mind controlled, and they both get into very sticky situations. It was so fun to listen to, so I highly recommend, if you have an Audible subscription, to pick this one up. Then I picked up another book called The Southern Nights series by M. Never, and this one is actually like 3 novellas combined into one, so it was a kind of like a full-length novel by the end of it. It tells the story of our main couple in 3 different pivotal moments in their lives and how it changes. So in the first book, we learn about our main characters getting to know each other in high school, falling in love, and have things that stop them from having their happily ever after, but they're still able to be together by the end of the book. Then we move into their college years, and now our hero is advancing in his football career and he's doing really well for himself, and then our female heroine who has to deal with all his fame and publicity. And then we move into the last chapter of their lives where they are now engaged and they're set to be married, but still they have a lot of hurdles to jump through. Overall, these 3 books was a lot to digest in one sitting, and it was just so much emotion and angst that went through our characters, and it felt so nice to kind of go through those 3 pivotal moments that I really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So if you're looking for a series that feature the same couple, then I think you'll really like this one. And then I picked up a novel that a lot of booktubers have talked about on booktube, and this one's called Raph, a buff male nanny novel by Rebecca Weatherspoon. And I think this might be my first Rebecca Weatherspoon novel, but I'm not too sure. It's certainly not going to be my last because I really like her writing. I think it's just so easy to sink into. But basically our hero is a tattooed buff hottie, and he's also a nanny, and he's being hired by our main female heroine who desperately needs a babysitter for her 2 twins. She's a single mom and she does not expect to hire someone so good looking and to have a strong attraction to. I really like this one, but I ended up giving it only a 3 out of 5 stars because the drama between her and her ex-husband was way too crazy for me. And then I also felt that the love happened way too quickly. So that's why it's only a 3 out of 5 stars, but I still really enjoyed it. And then I'm also going to talk about a thriller novel that is very popular because the author is very popular. His name is Riley Sager, and this one's called Survive the Night. This one sounded so good. It involved our female heroine who, unfortunately, her best friend has been murdered, and she is so depressed and she has so much anxiety over it that she decides to leave campus and go off and just like go back to her family. But then she gets a ride share with another person, and I think this is very common. I went to like a commuter school, so I never stayed on campus, but my friends who stayed on campus, what they would do to travel back to the hometowns that they grew up in would go into these packed vans where they would pay a certain student and then they'll do like the drop-offs. So it was just like a cheaper way of transportation, and that's what our main female heroine does. She pays a guy so that he can drive her to a certain location so she can take the bus. And in that car, she has conversations with him and she starts to suspect him of something, and he is hiding something. And now she feels like that she is trapped in the car with the killer of her best friend. This one, I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. I really, really did not like it. I felt that Riley always tends to build up the book and goes with a certain direction, but then scraps it towards the end. So this one, it was such a huge disappointment, and it was just so bad when everything was revealed. But anyways, that is it for all the books that I wanted to wrap up and talk about in my July wrap up. It's a fairly long wrap up, as you can tell, but I had a lot of books that I want to talk about. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.